Hi, I'm Andrew. I am the CEO and lead designer here at Designware.
And I'm Steven. I am just a designer at Designware.
Just a designer. So much more than that, Steven. And today we're here to talk about one of your projects that you recently built with Designware. It's an app. You want to tell us the name?
Sure. It's called Bandshake Onboarding. It's meant to be like the onboarding app for this fictional company called Bandshake.
Okay, cool. So we have a speed build running here in the background of your work, Steven, over the past couple of days. So let's start from the beginning. What was your inspiration behind this app? I kind of gave you the parameter that we wanted a macOS app example. We wanted it to be kind of an internal workforce application. So I kind of gave you that without much scope in mind. Where did you go from there?
I think the main source of inspiration was Microsoft Teams. And that kind of came from one of my past internships. We had a guy on our team whose job title was Microsoft Teams Evangelist. And it really sold me on the app. I mean, you can caption your own memes in Microsoft Teams. And it was like this just perfect balance of productivity and playfulness, which I don't see much in today's apps. Like when people think of, productivity apps or enterprise apps, they have a certain aesthetic in mind, like the early 2010s kind of jank aesthetic, I would call them.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be that way. And Microsoft Teams kind of heralded that whole aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, their primary color is purple, which is already super divergent from all the other productivity apps out there. So that was the main source of inspiration. Just that at the end of the day, it's a productivity app, but there's some playfulness to it.
That's a good point. It's interesting you mentioned the purple because the palette kind of reminded me of Slack in dark mode too, which I really like. So let's talk about colors then. How did you decide the direction for not just the purple, but the rest of the colors and the fonts and the logo? And what was your inspiration overall for the style of the app?
I think the style, I started with one color, and that's the nav bar color on the left.
Okay.
And once I just determined like, hey, I want this to be a dark theme app, and I don't want it to be just grayscale, black and white. I just settled on somewhere in between like the tech blue and just full black. And once I had that, the rest was it just kind of came into its own composition. That makes sense.
I love when you get into the flow like that, where it all just kind of clicks together.
It clicks together.
It just kind of rolls downhill. That's the best.
The first step is the hardest for sure.
Oh yeah, it always is. So what is your creative process when you're getting into this? How do you start and what's the middle ground? And everyone knows where it ends, but what is your cycle?
Right. For this one, I think for most of my projects, it's just super chaotic. I don't really go in there with a master plan or anything like that. It's just a handful of ideas. So I wanted it to be kind of column-based productivity app. So that kind of dictated the style of the nav bar, for example. And from there, I wanted it to have like sharper shapes as opposed to rounded corners. And I wanted to add like a splash of colors so it's not super boring. So those are just like the base, principles going in. And it took a lot of iterations and back and forth before I got to a certain style that I liked. So I didn't go in thinking, hey, I'm going to make this exactly as it is. It took a lot of back and forth. And that's the fun of having a creative, chaotic process.
And did you do the whole thing in Designware, or did you start with a mock-up program before that?
Nope, everything's in Designware.
What would you do differently next time if you could?
Yeah, I've had a lot of lessons learned from this project. The underlying foundations of making a new project in Designware is different than the likes of Adobe XD or Figma or Sketch, where it's all absolute. I think it would be important to keep in mind to start with the margins and the padding first, and then figure out how things should look once I put the content in. So basically starting with the blocks and then mold that into the design as opposed to the other way around, which I started with the Bandshake app. Yeah.
Got it. So having kind of like a working responsive wireframe almost built in Designware, just containers and blocks, and then filling the content in afterwards.
So as a designer, I'm in this mindset that what I see is what I get. So I would design it from scratch for this very specific dimension. And once that's done, I realized, it has to work on a variety of screens. But that's the part where all those considerations that I didn't have going into designing the actual app came into play. So when I started resizing the window, everything broke instantly because I didn't really make sure it was responsive from the get-go.
Right.
So I had to kind of go back to square one on that and figure out exactly how things should look when it's stretched out like that. What would a new column look like, and how would that, how should that resize down? Basically, when does it get crushed and change into another element? So that wasn't something I had in mind from the get-go, and I really should have started with that in mind. But that probably took just as long as the actual design is.
Right. So kind of going from like an absolute or fixed positioning mindset to a relative responsive positioning mindset using all the flex attributes that we use. What was your favorite part of the project?
Oh, my favorite part is probably going to have to be the apps and tools section with the fictional software. I've had so much fun creating those logos that still obviously parody the real thing, but hopefully just different enough to get us out of any legal trouble.
I appreciate that.
It's pretty odd.
As one of the owners, I really appreciate limited litigation.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, it looks beautiful. I love that section too. I also like the team section and the map, and it's all just super cool. It looks very legit. I really love the toolbar as well. So it's probably my favorite part of the application, just because it's interesting and unique in its own way. You usually see nav bars along the top, or toolbars that have kind of top justified content or bottom justified content. So what made you want to go center and make it look the way it does?
Mm-hmm. That was actually one of the elements that was cemented fairly early on. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like the anchor point for everything else in the app. Mm-hmm. So I wanted an application where you don't have to kind of scroll horizontally as much. And that kind of came from, I think, Microsoft's other suite of apps in their Office suite, where there's a lot of horizontal scroll for some reason, and it doesn't ever feel right. Mm-hmm. So I wanted one dominant form of navigation, so that's up and down, and to kind of facilitate users into interacting with the app that way. Mm-hmm. I started with the nav bar being vertical. So that's supposed to act like both a navigational menu and also a visual guide for users to know that, hey, this app is meant to be interacted with from top to bottom. So maybe some of those columns you see might be scrollable. It's kind of like a subtle hint that something kind of fits in this linear kind of hierarchy left to right.
Very cool. Okay, last question. How do you enjoy working at Designware? Put you on the spot.
It's my job at stake here, depending on my answer. It's been a super rewarding experience. I mean, I was hired for essentially product design, but I've had the opportunity to do so many things. I see myself improving from doing all these sorts of different work. And I especially liked having the kind of autonomy and the creative freedom that's a luxury.
For sure. Thank you, Stephen. This looks great. If anyone wants to check it out, check out our website's gallery page, and you can download the app for Mac OS and for Windows. And you might also be able to preview it on your browser itself. So give it a peek, and thank you, Stephen. Great work.